There's something about being trapped, not just physically, but emotionally, psychologically, that twists your instincts. Now imagine being trapped with a stranger, someone who smiles a second too long, or doesn't blink when they should. In tonight's True Horror Stories, you'll meet people who found themselves alone, stranded, and then trapped overnight with a stranger who may never have planned to let them go. These are their terrifying stories, and they are very real. This happened to me 3 years ago when I was driving across the country, moving from Arizona to Oregon. I was 26 at the time, had just quit a toxic job, and was finally trying to start over. It was supposed to be a clean break. I had everything I owned in the back of my car, and I was trying to make the trip over 3 days. I didn't expect what would happen on night 2. I'd been on the road all day, through the back roads of Nevada, and ended up rolling into a small desert town around 8 p.m. I was beyond exhausted, so I checked into the first motel I found. It was one of those sketchy, single-level places where the rooms line up like prison cells, all with faded green doors and a buzzing neon vacancy sign flickering in the corner. I didn't think much of it. I was just grateful to get off the road. I got my key from the front desk, room 107. The lady behind the counter looked like she hadn't slept in days and barely spoke to me. She slid the key across the counter and mumbled something like, "Don't let him bother you." I paused. "Excuse me?" She waved her hand. "The guy next door. He's been here all week. Just ignore him." Already uneasy, I walked down the row and opened my door. Room 106 was right beside mine. The lights inside were off, but I saw the curtains twitch slightly, like someone was peeking. I shrugged it off. Inside, the room was bare bones, a small bed with stiff white sheets, a TV from the 90s, and a musty smell that clung to the walls. I double-locked the door, set my backpack down, and took a quick shower before collapsing on the bed. It was around midnight when I first heard it. A knock. Not on my door, on the wall between my room and room 106. At first, it was just a tap. Then another. Then a low scratching sound, like fingernails dragging slowly along drywall. I froze. I turned off the TV and listened. The knocking stopped. A few minutes later, it started again, this time louder. 2 sharp knocks, then silence, then 3 knocks back. It was a pattern. I thought about calling the front desk, but my phone had almost no service and the motel phone was dead. So I just laid there, staring at the wall, heart pounding. After a few minutes, I heard the sound of a door creaking open, then footsteps outside. They stopped right outside my room. I didn't dare move. Then, a low voice whispered through my door, "I know you're in there." I sat up, heart hammering. Whoever it was didn't knock, they just stood there. For how long, I don't know, but I stayed frozen in my bed, clutching the cheap motel lamp like it was a weapon. Eventually, the footsteps retreated. I waited an hour before I even moved. The next morning, I went to the front desk to report it. The woman behind the counter was gone. A man was there now, maybe in his 60s. When I told him what happened, he gave me a weird look. "There's no one in room 106, he said. "We haven't rented that room in weeks." I didn't believe him. I demanded he check the logbook, but sure enough, room 106 hadn't been checked out to anyone since the start of the month. When I went back to look, the curtains were open. The room was completely empty. No furniture, no bedding, no lights, nothing. I left that motel in a full-blown panic and didn't stop driving until I hit Oregon. To this day, I don't know if it was a squatter, a drifter, or something worse. But I'll never stay in a roadside motel again, especially not next to an empty room. Back in 2019, I worked part-time for a wildlife research group in northern Montana. Our job was to track movements of certain endangered species by setting up motion-triggered cameras in remote wooded areas. The work wasn't glamorous, lots of hiking, setting up gear, and sleeping in ranger cabins for days at a time. But I liked the quiet. I liked being far away from people. But one night I realized just how far from help I really was. I was stationed at a small ranger outpost about 12 miles from the nearest road, only accessible by foot or ATV. The cabin was old but sturdy, wooden, slightly raised off the ground by about 3 feet because of snowfall during winter. I was there alone for 3 nights. The first 2 nights were uneventful, peaceful even. I heard wolves in the distance, an owl hooting near the chimney, nothing out of the ordinary for that part of Montana. But on the third night, something changed. It started around 2 a.m. I woke up because I thought I heard something moving underneath the cabin. The floorboards creaked ever so slightly, not from above or beside me, but from below. I froze in bed, straining to listen. There it was again, a light scraping sound. Then something thudded softly against the wooden beams beneath me. At first I thought maybe it was an animal, a fox maybe, or even a bear cub, but this sounded heavier, slower, deliberate. I didn't move. I just lay there, ears straining, heart racing. Then I heard it. A cough, not an animal sound. A human cough, muffled, raspy, like someone trying to hold it in. I sat bolt upright. There was someone under the cabin. I grabbed my flashlight and my boots, but I didn't dare open the door. The flashlight beam wasn't strong enough to see under the building from the window, and I wasn't about to go outside to investigate alone. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my radio and contacted the ranger base. It took a few minutes to get a response. The voice on the other end sounded half asleep. "You say there's someone under the structure?" "Yes," I whispered. "I heard coughing, scratching. It's a person." There was a long pause. Then the voice said, "That cabin doesn't have a crawl space." That's when I truly panicked. He explained, the cabin's base was solid wood panels, not open underneath like newer structures. There shouldn't be room for anyone or anything under there. "But I heard it," I said. "He coughed, he's still down there." The ranger promised to send a response team at first light. I sat in that cabin the rest of the night, holding a hatchet in one hand and a flare in the other. I kept hearing faint shifting sounds. Once, I swear I heard whispering, low and wet, like someone was talking through a mouthful of mud. Around 4 a.m., everything stopped. The forest outside went silent, not even the wind. Then, a knock. 3 heavy, slow knocks, right beneath the center of the cabin floor. I screamed. I didn't sleep a second that night. When the sun finally came up and the rangers arrived, I stumbled out of the cabin, half hysterical. They inspected the foundation, every inch, and they found it. Behind a patch of rotted wood, there was a small opening, just wide enough for someone to squeeze through, someone skinny. Inside that hidden space was a ratty sleeping bag, a stack of food wrappers, and a butcher's knife. But no person. Whoever was under there had been living beneath the cabin, possibly for days. We never found out who it was or how they got that deep into the wilderness. The only tracks led back into the forest, and even those disappeared after a few yards. Since then, I've never gone back to that site. I transferred to a data analysis position where I don't have to leave the office. Because out there, in the woods, you're not always as alone as you think you are. It was the summer of 2021 when I flew home to visit my parents in rural Oregon. Their town was small, surrounded by mountains and long, empty roads. They still lived in the house I grew up in, and I hadn't been back in nearly 2 years. The flight landed late, around 10:45 p.m. My plan was simple: catch an Uber from the regional airport, get home, sleep. I didn't expect a problem. I'd done it a dozen times before, but this time, it wasn't my driver who showed up. I ordered the ride from the terminal. The app said a black Chevy Cruze would arrive in 7 minutes. Driver's name was Thomas. I waited outside under the buzzing yellow lights, suitcase by my side. About 6 minutes later, a black Chevy pulled up to the curb. It matched the make and model, tinted windows, no hubcaps, Oregon plates. It slowed right in front of me, rolled down the window, and a man leaned over from the driver's seat. "You waiting for a ride?" I looked down at my app. The driver's name, car, and license plate should match, but I froze. The plate was close, only one letter off. My driver's plate was 3U9 Het. This one said 3U9 Hep. Just a coincidence? "I'm here for Jake," the man said. "You going to Maple Drive?" I hadn't entered an address yet, and my name wasn't Jake. I took a step back. "No," I said, "not me." He gave a weird smile, like he was trying to be friendly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's a short ride. Come on, I'm going your way." By now, I'd noticed something else. No Uber sticker, no phone mount, and he kept one hand out of sight, low, by the gear shift. "I think I'll wait for my ride," I said, backing away. He stared at me for a long second. His eyes didn't blink. Then, without another word, he drove off, slow at first, then peeling away into the dark. 30 seconds later, my real Uber showed up. Same model, different driver. A younger guy in his 20s who was polite and cheerful. I told him about the other car. He looked worried. "Something like that happened to a girl I picked up last month. She said a guy was trying to impersonate me. Creep was waiting near the terminal just like that. Same story. Name was off, plate was almost right." I asked if she reported it. He said she had, but nothing ever came of it. The ride home was quiet after that. I couldn't shake the thought someone out there had memorized the common cars and plate types used by rideshare drivers. He even knew the street I lived on. That night, I lay in my old bedroom staring at the ceiling fan, and I realized that man didn't just pick me at random. He knew the flight schedule. He knew what the average tired traveler looked like. Probably had been doing this more than once, maybe for weeks. And maybe one night, someone did get in the wrong car. And maybe they never made it home. In late October of 2020, I went on a solo hiking trip in the Sawtooth Mountains of Idaho. I'd just finished a tough semester in college, and I wanted nothing more than silence, nature, and the kind of isolation that felt cleansing, like you'd come back changed. I chose a route most people ignored that time of year, a 3-day trail near Pine Creek that looped past an old, supposedly inactive ranger station deep in the forest. The building hadn't been staffed in over a decade, and the Forest Service had long since taken it off official maps. It was supposed to be locked, sealed, forgotten. But when I got there, just before sundown on the second day, something was off. The path dipped down into a foggy grove. As I neared the clearing where the cabin was supposed to sit, I noticed fresh tracks in the mud, not animal prints but boot prints, large, deep, recent. Then the trees parted and the ranger station appeared, except the door was open. I froze about 20 yards out. The cabin was a single-story structure with a small deck, collapsed railing and rotted siding. It leaned slightly to one side like it had taken a beating from winter after winter. But there was no mistaking it. The door hung open by a few inches, not blown by wind, propped. Something inside me screamed to turn around, but I was stupid and curious. I figured maybe another hiker had taken shelter, or maybe some hunter had broken in. I could just take a quick look and move on. I stepped onto the porch. The wood creaked beneath me. A musty, sour smell wafted out from inside. Mildew, old paper, and something else. Something metallic. The inside was shadowed, but moonlight lit part of the interior. There was a table, an old steel locker, broken chairs. But what made my blood run cold was the wall across from the entrance. It was covered in photos, hundreds of them, clipped up with rusted nails. Most were damaged by time or damp, but some were perfectly preserved. And they weren't just nature shots. They were people, hikers, campers, couples, families, all smiling in front of tents or sitting by fires. One looked like it had been taken just a few months ago, a girl in a red jacket holding a map. She looked like she had no idea someone was behind her. I stepped inside slowly and moved toward the wall. My head swam. One photo was labeled in pencil. Taken 3 miles from the lake, alone, stayed 2 nights. Another read, no return. That's when I heard the click. From the back room, footsteps followed, slow and deliberate. I backed away, nearly knocking over a chair. The back door, the one I didn't even know existed, creaked open. A figure stepped through. He was tall, dressed in brown canvas, with a hood pulled over his head and something long in his hand. Maybe a walking stick. Maybe not. I didn't wait. I bolted out the front door and tore down the trail like my life depended on it. The thing is, I think it did. I never looked back, not once. Not even when I reached my car 3 hours later and locked myself inside, shaking and gasping like I'd escaped a nightmare. I told the local ranger station the next morning. They sent someone out to check, but all they found was the old ranger cabin, door shut, completely empty. No photos, no boot prints, no figure. They told me I'd imagined it. Stress, they said, overexertion. But I know what I saw. I know what was inside that cabin. And I'll never forget one last thing. The photo of the girl in the red jacket. A few weeks later, I saw a missing persons flyer at a gas station. Same girl, same jacket. No body ever found. After my uncle died in early 2019, I got a strange letter from a lawyer in Vermont. It said I'd inherited a small property, a one-room cabin on a plot of land in the northern Green Mountains. My uncle, Arthur Maynard, was a recluse. I hadn't spoken to him in years. I barely even remembered what he looked like, but the deed was signed, the papers legal, and suddenly I owned a place in the middle of nowhere. I drove up there a few weeks later just to check it out. I didn't plan to stay long. I figured it'd be a cool photo op at best and a teardown at worst. But the moment I got close, something about the air changed. The road ended 3 miles short, so I hiked in. It was late afternoon, light breaking through the trees like golden knives. Quiet, too quiet. The cabin wasn't much, just a mossy, tilted wooden box with one broken window and a front porch that barely held together. But when I stepped inside, I stopped dead in my tracks. Because someone had been living there. Recently, there was a cot in the corner, canned food stacked neatly, a still warm mug of coffee sitting on the table, as if whoever was here had just stepped out for a walk. And there was something else, a photograph pinned to the wall above the cot. It was me, taken from a distance, in front of my apartment. I was getting into my car. The photo was grainy but clearly recent. The trees in the background had the same orange leaves they had that week. Beneath the photo was a handwritten note. Perfect fit. That's when I heard the leaves crunch outside. I froze, heart hammering. More footsteps, heavy ones. Someone was circling the cabin. I backed toward the door, trying not to breathe. There were no weapons inside, no phone signal. Just me and this small wooden box. And then, something scratched the side of the cabin. Not an animal. It was slow, deliberate. A sharp scraping, like metal on wood. I ducked low and peeked out the window. A figure stood just beyond the porch. They wore a hunter's coat and a mask, porcelain white, with black slits where the eyes should be, motionless, watching. I grabbed the coffee mug, the only thing I could use as a weapon, and bolted out the door. I ran down the trail, branches cutting my face, my breath burning in my throat. I never looked back. I didn't stop until I hit my car, tires spinning in gravel as I peeled away from that place. I called the sheriff once I had signal. He sent a unit up the trail. Said they found the cabin, but it had been empty for years. No mug, no cot, no photos. Just dust and cobwebs. When I pressed, the deputy finally admitted something strange. I wasn't the first person to report that cabin. Every few years, someone shows up saying they inherited it, but no one ever proves ownership. There's no record of Arthur Maynard in any county registry, no family listing, no death certificate. It's like he never existed. And whoever or whatever waits in that cabin, it doesn't seem to care who shows up next. Just that they come alone. In 2016, I took a 2-week solo vacation to the Appalachian region of North Carolina. I wanted to unplug. No phones, no cities, just mountains, old books, and maybe the occasional hike. I booked a small cabin through a local rental site. Nothing fancy. Rustic. Claimed to be built in the early 1900s, but updated for modern comfort. It was surrounded by dense forest, several miles from the nearest town. When I arrived, the host wasn't there, just a key in a lockbox and a handwritten welcome note. The place had charm, worn floorboards, a stone fireplace, and creaky steps that groaned with every move. But the first thing I noticed was the silence. I mean absolute silence. Even the birds were quiet. That night, I lay on the tiny bed listening to wind brushing against the windows. Then, I heard voices. Not outside, beneath me, under the floor. I froze. It wasn't just one voice. It was multiple, whispering, murmuring, laughing. I leaned over the side of the bed and pressed my ear to the floorboards. There was something underneath the cabin. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I heard one thing clearly, a woman's voice whisper, "He's here." I grabbed my flashlight and went outside to check the foundation. No cellar, no visible access point. The structure was perched on wooden stilts, just above the ground. I should have left right then, but I didn't. The next day, I contacted the host. She claimed the property was completely normal. No basement, no crawl space, no history of anyone living under the cabin. But that night, the voices came again. This time they were louder. He's awake. He knows. We see him. I packed my bag in a panic, but when I opened the front door to leave, I stopped cold. There were footprints on the porch, bare, muddy human footprints, leading up to the front doors and then disappearing. Like whoever made them had vanished into thin air. I backed away from the door. Then the whispering started again, only now it wasn't beneath the cabin. It was inside. I turned and the floor bulged. Not cracked, bulged, like something beneath the boards was pushing upward. I ran out, jumped in my car and sped off down the dirt road without looking back. Later, back in town, I met a local who worked at the hardware store. When I told him where I'd been staying, his face dropped. "That place," he asked, "they still rent that out?" He went on to say that the land used to belong to a preacher in the early 1900s who believed his family was possessed. Instead of seeking help, he sealed them beneath the cabin, alive. The place was condemned for years, but eventually sold and rebranded as a rustic getaway. I checked the listing a week later. It was gone. But I still wonder, if I had stayed one more night, would the voices have come through the floor, or would I have ended up underneath them?